Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Perdue, welcome. We had a chance to discuss a number of issues that, challenges, frankly, that face Wisconsin dairy farmers prior to your confirmation and actually even subsequent to your confirmation. While there were an array of issues that we discussed, I raised, I think, heightened concerns about the changes that our neighbors to the north, Canada, have made in their dairy pricing practices that are disrupting trading between our two countries. They're blocking access for U.S. product into Canada. This has had a major impact, as I've shared with you, on Wisconsin for the past year, and has literally threatened the livelihoods of dozens of Wisconsin farmers. When the president was in Wisconsin recently, he promised that he would convince Canada to change their dairy pricing program. And now that you've had a chance to look into this matter as secretary and have spoken to your Canadian counterparts, I am very, very eager to hear what the plan is to help Wisconsin dairy farmers suffering from this unfair pricing scheme that Canada has adopted.
Thank you, Senator. We unashamedly addressed this with Minister McCauley, my counterpart in Canada. Monday was a week ago in Toronto. We were there, and we had the beginning of bilateral discussions, but dairy was at the forefront of that. We indicated that we believe the Class 7 designation that Canada had just installed was unfair, and it had created a glut on the world market that we were not prepared to accept. I told him and have told everyone that it's not our intention to get involved in Canadian supply management. They've got a different dairy program than we do. That's their prerogative. It was not included in Canada, but it's also not fair for them to create another class of milk that allows their producers to overproduce on a quota system and then blend the surplus milk off to below world prices on the world market. That affects not only the U.S. but other dairy exporting nations as well. That point is very clear out there. I think, again, these are exactly the kind of points with Canada and with sugar in Mexico that the President has talked about renegotiating NAFTA, and I can assure you from our perspective, those will be at the forefront of the issues that we discuss regarding NAFTA renegotiations.
Well, Mr. Secretary, it sounds like you pursued the issue pointing out exactly what I would hope. What did you hear in response, and what is our plan? Because the farmers that I represent need solutions, and they need them really fast.
Well, one of the things we heard, and the Canadians have tried to put a Band-Aid on this by offering contracts to those 75 Wisconsin dairy farmers that had lost their contract. We consider that a Band-Aid approach, not a solution approach to that, and we pressed them on that. But you have to remember, Senator, that these negotiations, this was our first date, and it was, we weren't even holding hands yet. So we look forward to, we were very candid discussions, and it was my responsibility to lay out the concerns I had. We did that on dairy. We did that on some of the wheat grading issues that we have in the Northern Plains regarding our wheat being graded as feed grade wheat going in there as well, and then as the wine, where in some of their provinces they have U.S. wine back behind a cage where the Canadian wine is out where the consumers can get it. So there were several issues, but dairy was at the forefront of that.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary, and just urge you to continue to be very strenuous on this issue because it's so important to the farmers that you mentioned. I hope to get to a quick second question, which is the USDA rural development funding in the budget. Last year, USDA Rural Development awarded $556 million for more than 8,700 projects in Wisconsin rural communities. And while I hear the administration talk about helping rural communities being a shared goal, the budget that we've just seen suggests otherwise. And I'm troubled by the elimination of water and wastewater treatment funding for our rural areas and communities. The elimination of funds that help with distance learning and telemedicine are vital in my state, and the zeroing out of broadband grants. Wisconsin communities need this funding. For example, the village of Viola received $3.4 million from a USDA program that the budget cuts would that the budget now cuts to replace outdated water service lines that leaked 30% of the water they carried and exposed residents to contaminated water. So I'm hoping, and I'd like to hear from you, if you'd reconsider the decision to cut rural infrastructure funding and work with us to include really robust funding for those vital programs.
Senator, we've had a great discussion before you were able to join us about that, and this committee has had my commitment that we're going to take the rural development funds that this committee recommends as well as the Congress recommends and use them to as far as they'll go as what rural development has been known for. We've got I have a strong commitment to that, and I think when we get the budget right size, you'll see some efforts that way.